Story 1. I'm from the USA, so there might be a few small mistakes, but I'll make sure to proofread. The dialogue isn't exact, but it's pretty close to what was said. At the time of this story, I was 15 years old, 5'7" tall, and weighed about 120 pounds with a slim build. Backstory. My parents and our old neighbors decided to do some post-Christmas shopping for the holiday discounts. They brought their child along, so I was asked to watch him while they shopped. I was allowed to bring my Nintendo Switch to keep myself entertained. The neighbor's kid was well-behaved and trusted me like I was his older brother. When we arrived at the mall, neighbor's kid and I went to a group of couches near a small playground and some stationary rides located in front of a large retailer. There were a few parents and kids around, so it wasn't too crowded. I sat down and told neighbor's kid to go play, reminding him to stay in the area, which he did. After about half an hour, he returned and sat beside me. I had downloaded a game for him in case he got bored, so I opened it up and handed him my phone, making it clear he could only play the game. He happily played, passing each level with giggles. Suddenly, this happened. Entitled kid, can I play? Neighbor's kid, can he play too? Me, no, neighbor's kid, it's just for you. Turning to entitled kid, sorry, but it's only for him. Entitled kid pouted and walked away. About 5 minutes later, I noticed a woman standing nearby, clearly upset. Me, can I help you, ma'am? Entitled mother angrily. Why won't you let entitled kid play that game, pointing to my phone? Me, because it's my phone, and I don't feel comfortable handing it to anyone else. Entitled mother, then who's that, pointing to neighbor's kid? Me, that's neighbor's kid. By this time, neighbor's kid had looked up, confused. Neighbor's kid, what's going on? Me, nothing, neighbor's kid, keep playing. Entitled mother to neighbor's kid, give me the phone, neighbor's kid. Me, no, don't give it to her. Entitled mother to me, I bet you don't even deserve that phone, and it looks like you're rich enough to buy a new one, gesturing to my Switch. Me, it doesn't matter whether you think I deserve it or not, it was a gift. For context, my brother had bought me the Switch with his bonus money. Entitled mother, I don't care, my son deserves to play on your phone more than neighbor's kid does. By now, a few parents nearby had started to glance over, hearing the escalating argument. Me, neighbor's kid is respectful and well-mannered. He wouldn't ask to take something from someone else if the situation were reversed. At this point, I was getting frustrated. I didn't want to deal with this during my winter break. Entitled mother, then why won't he listen to me, huh? Me, because he knows the phone is mine, and he respects me more than a random stranger. Like I said, neighbor's kid and I were close. I'd known him since he was born, and I visited him regularly. Entitled mother yelling, you need to listen to me, you little brat. Give me your phone and leave. I was taken aback and furious, but made sure not to curse. Me shouting, what is your problem? This is my phone, and I have the right to decide who uses it. I don't want to give it to you. My outburst caused everyone nearby to stop and watch. I heard some people whispering. Entitled mother shouting, don't you raise your voice at me? I'm an adult, and you're just a kid. Didn't your parents teach you to respect your elders? Me. Yes, but not when they act like this. At this point, entitled mother tried to slap me, but I blocked her arm and pushed it away. Then, she snatched the phone from neighbor's kid's hands and stuffed it into her purse. She hurried off well, more like a quick wobble since she was wearing heels. I handed my Switch to neighbor's kid and chased after her to get my phone back. She wasn't fast, and I'm a pretty decent runner, so I caught up with her quickly. I didn't want to hurt her, so I grabbed her arm and tripped her, carefully slowing her fall. I pinned her down by the arms and went for the purse when I heard heavy footsteps approaching. It was the mall cop running toward us. Mall cop, get away from her, young man. Me. No, sir, she stole my phone. Entitled mother fake crying, Help! He was trying to steal my phone, and I ran. Then he tackled me. Mall cop, step away from her, and ma'am, come over here. I stepped back. An entitled mother reluctantly complied. Mall cop asked her a few questions before coming over to me. I explained everything. Mall cop, do you have any proof? Me? Yes, neighbor's kid was with me the whole time. Pointing toward the play area. We all went back to where neighbor's kid was, and mall cop asked him what happened. Neighbor's kid confirmed my story, and mall cop also asked a few other adults nearby. Meanwhile, entitled mother stood smirking, likely thinking she had the upper hand because I had tripped her. When mall cop returned, he asked me to describe my phone. I told him it was a black Motorola with a clear case, and the lock screen was an image of a bridge leading to a beach. I also mentioned it had a fingerprint sensor on the back. Mall cop then asked entitled mother to hand over the phone, and when she did, it matched the description perfectly. Mall cop asked entitled mother to unlock the phone. She tried multiple times but couldn't open it. When I tried, it unlocked immediately. Realizing she was caught, entitled mother tried to make a run for it, but mall cop grabbed her and placed her under arrest. I mentioned that she had a child with her, so he went to get entitled kid. Before leaving, mall cop gave me a stern warning not to leave neighbor's kid unattended again. I apologized. I never saw entitled mother again after that. When my parents returned, neighbor's kid told them the story as best he could, and I filled in the rest. They praised me for standing up for myself, but also disciplined me for what I could have handled better. Story 2. Backstory for context. About a week ago, I had just been discharged from the hospital after experiencing severe pain behind my knee. The pain was so intense that I couldn't sit, stand upright, walk, lie down, or fully bend or straighten my leg. It came out of nowhere and worsened each day, leaving me bedridden for 2 weeks. Despite drinking plenty of cold water due to the heat, the pain was so bad that I would lose the urge to get up, even to eat or use the bathroom. Any movement was unbearable. Doctors were baffled, so they performed a CT scan and MRI, and even called in an oncologist because I had a large mass of fat behind my leg, the size of a football. Hearing oncologist scared me, as I feared the worst. It turned out that what I thought was just a bad cramp was actually torn tendons and ligaments. I hadn't fallen or hit my leg, which confused everyone. Thankfully, the large mass was just a fatty tumor, nothing serious, according to the doctors and the surgeon. No surgery was necessary, and I was told the swelling would go down and my leg would heal naturally over time. Since being discharged, I had been using a walker, but as the pain became more tolerable, I switched to a cane. I still used it to avoid risking a fall. Now that's out of the way, here's the story. I had been given strong pain medication hydrocodone when I was discharged, but only for 3 days due to its addictive nature. Once it ran out, I resorted to Tylenol, which was the strongest over-the-counter painkiller I could get. I found that I had to either keep my leg completely still or keep it moving, like walking, as standing still too long caused pain. The incident happened 2 days ago. Rather than staying home and doing my leg exercises, I decided to accompany my dad to the pharmacy. I thought walking around might help and also wanted to spend some quality time with him since our relationship had been a bit rocky. When we arrived at the pharmacy, I told my dad that I also wanted to grab some snacks. He agreed, so we split up. He went across the street to grab a few groceries while I stayed in the pharmacy. I took my time, browsing with a basket and picking up my items, including some pain meds. As I waited in line to check out, leaning on my cane and struggling to stay upright due to my leg, an entitled dad and his son stood behind me. The son, who was around 6 years old, didn't say a word the whole time. Suddenly, the entitled dad made a snide remark, saying, "Quit being a drama queen, you can wait." I turned to him and replied, "I have a bad leg. I can't stand for too long," in an irritated tone before turning away. But then, this man had the audacity to walk over, pick up my basket, and start rummaging through my items. I demanded loudly, Put down my basket now, making sure others around could hear. He scoffed and handed the basket to his son, continuing to rummage through it. He picked up my snacks and commented on them before getting to my pain meds. "What are you, some sort of junkie? What's with all the painkillers? You're getting off on these, aren't you?" he sneered. There were only a few other customers in line, most staring or trying to avoid getting involved. I ignored his question and firmly asked for my basket back. This only made him angrier. He shouted, "You're hooked on these, aren't you?" before throwing the items back into the basket. At this point, I was next in line, but my leg was starting to feel stiff. I moved closer to the counter and asked once again for my basket. The entitled dad shouted, "Fine," and instead of handing it to me, he tossed it at my head, as if throwing a basketball. I put my hands up to block it, but the force knocked me backward. I stumbled, and in an attempt to catch my balance, I fell straight onto my back. The rope from my cane, which was still wrapped around my wrist, caused the cane to spin back, and I landed painfully on my right arm. I screamed and cried out in agony as I lay on the floor, trying to move my body to my right side. Sitting or standing up was unbearable, so I chose to stay on the floor. The other customers, cashier, and store manager quickly rushed to help me, while others began shouting at the entitled dad. Through the pain, I loudly demanded, "Call the cops and don't let him leave. I'm pressing charges." The entitled dad, doubling down on his behavior, shouted back at everyone, "He's exaggerating. He's not hurt. Look at all these pain meds." He walked back to my basket, picking up the Tylenol. "He's probably getting high off of these. No one needs this much Tylenol. He's an addict. He doesn't even need that cane." He kicked my cane away, but it was still attached to my wrist. "It's all fake. He's putting on an act." By now, his voice started to tremble, as if he realized he wasn't going to win this one. Grabbing his son's hand, he put their basket down and tried to speed walk out of the store, muttering something like, "Come on, son, we don't need this. We'll go to another store." However, one of the customers blocked his path, along with the manager, who was already on the phone with the police. Upon hearing that officers were on their way, the entitled dad bolted, dragging his son along. He shoved the customer blocking him into the metal detector near the entrance. As the entitled dad stumbled toward the exit, a woman with a stroller stood confused at the doorway, unsure of what was happening. The customer who had been shoved quickly got back up, ran after the entitled dad, spun him around, and tackled him to the floor, pinning him down. Fast forward a bit. My dad returned to the store, shocked, asking what had happened. The manager and other customers explained everything to him. The police arrived shortly after, and statements were taken from everyone involved. I pressed charges, and the entitled dad was arrested and taken away in cuffs. His son stayed behind and was picked up later by his aunt. Before I left, the boy looked at me and said, "I'm sorry." Story 3. A bit of backstory. My younger sister, who is more than 10 years younger than me, used to suffer from severe social anxiety when she was little. Thankfully, after going to therapy, she improved significantly over the years. Now, she functions just fine. She's very talkative and funny with family and friends, though still a bit shy when dealing with strangers. The only times her old anxiety flares up are when she has to speak in public or when strangers get confrontational with her. This part is important for what happens next. About 2 years ago, when my sister was 18, I returned home after being out of the country for several months. Since she had just had her birthday a few weeks earlier, I decided to take her shopping. My sister is a talented artist, and at the time, she was convinced that artists should dress in a classy way. So, when I picked her up, she was dressed in gray trousers, a white shirt, and a vest. She looked very official and put together. We went shopping for painting supplies, and on the way home, I stopped by a large hardware store to grab some things I needed for an upcoming hiking trip with my friends. My sister came inside with me and wandered off to browse other items while I quickly did my shopping. About 10 minutes later, as I was heading toward the registers, I started looking around to find my sister. That's when I heard a man shouting angrily. He was yelling at someone, presumably an employee, about how incompetent they were, threatening to get them fired, and using a lot of foul language. Normally, I'm the type of person who would stand up for an employee in that situation, but I was tired and didn't want to deal with it. However, as I walked closer to where the incident was taking place, I realized with horror that the man wasn't yelling at an employee, he was yelling at my sister. This man, who looked like someone who had just walked off a Mad Max movie set, but wearing a business suit, was holding my sister by her hand and shouting profanities in her face. She looked terrified and was on the verge of tears. I immediately went into protective brother mode. I sprinted across the aisle, shoved the guy away from my sister, and yelled at him to leave her alone. He let go of her and, at first, looked shocked. Then he got aggressive and started yelling at me, asking who I thought I was and other nonsense. He even tried shoving me, but since I was much taller and heavier, I wrestled him to the ground, where he kept screaming incoherently. By this time, the commotion had attracted the attention of a store employee who quickly called a manager and security. I explained what had happened, and after the guy calmed down, I let him go. He continued ranting about how he was going to sue us, but didn't try to get physical again. The manager called the police, who arrived and took statements from everyone, including my sister, who by then was able to speak more clearly. They also reviewed the store's security footage. Apparently, here's what had happened before I got involved. My sister was looking at some electronics when she noticed some headphones had fallen off a shelf. She started to put them back when this man saw her. Because she was dressed so officially, he assumed she worked there. He stood next to her, waiting for her to acknowledge him. But my sister, not realizing he needed anything, just continued what she was doing. After a while, the man got frustrated, grabbed her by the shoulder, and began yelling at her about how unprofessional she was. My sister, being shy and caught off guard, started stammering and couldn't get out that she didn't work there. This only made the man angrier. He became more aggressive and even slapped her not hard, but like someone trying to wake a person up. That's when I showed up, and you know the rest. After hearing the full story, the police arrested the man, much to his surprise. I remember him actually saying, "What are you doing? Why aren't you arresting him? He attacked me." He couldn't seem to understand that grabbing my sister and slapping her was not okay. The man was later charged with assault and ended up getting probation, a few hundred hours of community service, and mandatory anger management classes. We didn't care much about the details after that. The store manager apologized to us, even though we didn't blame the store for what happened, and gave us some vouchers as a goodwill gesture. Thankfully, my sister was physically okay aside from a small bruise where he had grabbed her hand. She was a bit shaken up, but in the end, everything was fine. The end. Story 4. This is a story from my high school experience where I managed to get one over on my potential driver's ed teacher. I grew up with a form of autism, later classified as Asperger's syndrome. However, my Asperger's was mild, so I was offered the opportunity to enroll in the school's driver's ed class. I was what is known as a visual learner, meaning I had a harder time learning from textbooks than through hands-on experience or visual representation. I could still learn the traditional way, but it required extra effort. The idea of driving was both exciting and nerve-wracking for me, and seeing my single mother's excitement about the school offering this course motivated me to try for my license even more. I studied the handbook alongside my schoolwork. My mom helped me with flashcards for road signs and rules of the road, preparing me as much as possible to pass the written test before getting behind the wheel with a teacher. But this is where things started to go wrong. Part of the test included an eye exam, which was conducted one-on-one with the instructor. This instructor had a strange attitude towards kids with conditions like mine, and during the test, when I'd miss a question, he'd make comments like how I shouldn't drive because I'd be inattentive or that I lacked the mental capacity to drive safely. While those weren't his exact words, that was the message he conveyed. As the course went on, I became more nervous and scared of failing. Despite my hard work, I started making more mistakes and eventually flunked out of the course. The teacher seemed pleased to see me go, and my mom was upset with me for not passing. This sent me into a bit of a depression, and I almost went down a bad path. However, this opened the door to another opportunity, taking a computer course. I had a natural knack for computers, so I enrolled in the class. I learned the basics, like using Microsoft Office, making PowerPoint presentations, creating resumes in Word, and doing some work in Excel. This is also where I met a good friend of mine who I still talk to from time to time. We'd hang out in the computer lab during free periods, playing games like Halo C** and RuneScape** when we were home. Fast forward a few months to the end of the quarter. Students received letters from their courses with reports about their progress, kind of like a personalized report card. I, of course, received my letter from the computer class, but I was surprised to find a letter from the driver's ed teacher as well. I expected it to be a simple failure letter, but what I got was far more. The teacher not only stated that I had failed, but he also claimed I was unfit to drive due to my disability, and mentioned that he would recommend to the DMV that I be excluded from taking the test. Naturally, this upset me. My friend from computer class noticed how this affected me, especially when I wasn't playing as well in Halo** and spent less time on RuneScape**. He messaged me on AIM and asked what was going on. It took a while, but I eventually told him about the teacher, how much it was affecting me and my mom, and how I feared I might never be able to drive because of it. Instead of pitying me, my friend suggested we get back at the teacher. At first, I was hesitant, but eventually, I agreed. Unknowingly, the teacher had given us all the tools we needed. The letter I received was on the teacher's usual stationery, something he had been using for years. The formatting was easy to replicate, and he always used a scanned signature at the bottom of the letters for convenience. My friend came up with most of the plan, while I wrote a letter mimicking the teacher's style and attached his scanned signature to it. Yes, this might technically be considered forgery, but stick with me. Come Monday, my friend and I went to school like usual. We knew the cafeteria truck would arrive for the weekly delivery, typically done mid-second period. My friend's class had a view of the loading docks, where the truck parked, and the teacher's driving course was set up on a nearby flat top used for outdoor activities. During the second period, we made our move. While the truck driver was busy inside, likely signing off on the delivery, and the teacher was away in his classroom, we taped the folded letter to the truck door. The letter we wrote was an apology from the teacher, explaining that one of the students had lost control and hit the truck, leaving a few dings. It was signed, "Sorry," followed by the teacher's name. Later, my friend had the perfect view of what happened. The truck driver found the note and, believing the apology, got angry. He stormed over to the driver's ed teacher's car and, armed with a bat, smashed the windshield of the vehicle the teacher used for lessons. Looking back, I still smile at the memory. I've shared this story with close friends over the years. Some people think the windshield damage might have been too much, but considering the teacher tried to limit my life and opportunities over something I couldn't control, I feel he deserved it. Most of my friends agree. Oh, and in case you're wondering, I did get my license despite the teacher's recommendation. It turns out that while school programs can help you get a step ahead with the DMV, they aren't required or heavily considered in the final decision. Story 5. This happened about 5 years ago when I was working as a newly qualified social worker. I don't anymore. It was a nightmare. It had been a rough morning, and long story short, I had both spit and vomit on me. As a standard practice, I kept a spare set of court clothes in my car, so I had something to change into. However, I felt disgusting and wanted a shower, so I decided to take an early lunch and head to my gym, which was nearby, to shower and change. After showering, I came out with my hair up in a towel turban and headed back to the lockers. The changing area was empty except for a boy, who looked about 8 or 9 years old. It was a bit strange for him to be alone, but I assumed his mom must have been in the only occupied stall. I smiled to acknowledge him and went to my locker to grab my clothes to change into. As I was getting my things, the boy looked at me, pointed at my towel turban, and said, "What's that?" I responded, "Oh, it's a towel turban. Pretty neat, huh? It stays up better than a regular towel." "Cool," he said, then reached toward my head. Startled, I asked, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" "I just want to see it," he replied. No, sorry, I'm using it." At this point in my life, I was used to kids being a bit inappropriate, and it was my job to help them understand boundaries. Still, I wasn't expecting this. The boy looked a little annoyed, but went back to playing on his mom's phone. I quickly got dressed, gathered my things, and went over to the mirror to take off the towel turban and dry my hair. As I was flipping my hair around, I noticed the boy approaching the mirror before quickly walking away. I didn't think much of it and finished drying my hair. When I went to reach for my towel turban, surprise, it was gone. I immediately knew what had happened. I turned around, and there he was, turning red and staring at his phone, pretending to ignore me. I was trying to stay calm, but after the morning I'd had, being spat on and vomited on, and now having my towel turban stolen, I was at my limit. Using my firm, enough is enough voice, I said, "Please return the turban, now." The boy continued to ignore me, so I repeated myself, "Please return the turban, now." He mumbled. I didn't take it, while avoiding eye contact, but it was obvious he was lying. Frustrated, I walked over to the only occupied stall and knocked on the door. "Excuse me, is this your son out here?" I asked. The door swung open, revealing an irritated woman who looked at me and snapped, "What?" I replied, "Is this your son? He has taken my towel turban, and I've asked him to return it, but he hasn't. Could you please ask him to give it back? I'd rather not involve the gym staff." She gave me a confused look. "What is a towel turban?" I started explaining, but before I could finish, the boy interjected, "It's a hair towel that stays up better than a regular towel." We both looked at him, and then the mom turned back to me. "Okay, so what do you want?" "I'd like my towel turban back, please," I said. Her response was dismissive. "Well, he wouldn't just take something. You probably lost it. Don't go around accusing people just because you can't keep track of your things." Now annoyed, I suggested, "Well, if that's the case, he won't mind emptying his bag. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize." The mother glanced at her son, clearly aware he was lying, but she stood her ground. "Don't be ridiculous. I'm not letting you go through his things like he's some kind of thief. Look at you, harassing a little boy in a changing room." I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "I'm not asking to touch anything. I'm asking you to go through his bag for my towel. If you refuse, I'll have to involve the staff." She scoffed. "Oh, so now you're threatening me." Recognizing the situation was going in circles, I stepped outside and called for a staff member to help. "Enter the gym trainer." He looked between the three of us. The boy was still staring at his phone, and the mom had positioned herself between her son and the trainer. "What's going on?" he asked. The mother quickly started ranting. "This crazy woman is harassing my son, trying to go through his bag. She needs to be thrown out." I calmly explained, "Her son took my towel turban, and I'd like it returned." The trainer asked the boy, "So, what happened, buddy? Did you take the towel?" The mother mumbled something about me losing it, while the boy stayed silent. Seeing no other way, the trainer suggested, "Why don't we just check his bag?" The boy began wailing dramatically, and his mother started ranting about how this was harassment. The trainer, looking uncomfortable, repeated, "It's the only way to sort this out." Frustrated, the mom shoved the bag into the trainer's hands, saying, "Fine, check it, and when you don't find it, I want her out of here." The trainer opened the bag and, sure enough, found my pink, wet towel turban. He held it up, and the boy wailed even louder, trying to grab it back. "Is this yours?" the trainer asked. "Yes, thank you," I replied, taking it back and stuffing it into my bag. As I was putting my ID lanyard around my neck, the mom's expression changed. She had just realized I was a social worker. She grabbed her son, snatched the bag from the trainer, and stormed out. The trainer looked confused, and I explained that she must have been embarrassed that her son had stolen my towel turban. But I suspected she was panicking, realizing her son was skipping school and stealing things. Story 6. I was feeling rather hungry for dinner and craving pizza, so, like anyone would, I ordered one. Then I hopped in the car and drove to pick it up because, well, I was really hungry. On my way to the pizza place, I found myself behind a super fancy British car, either a Rolls or a Bentley, one of those high-end cars that are more of a status symbol than just transportation. The windows were tinted, and the driver was handling it erratically. The car kept swerving all over the road, drifting from one side to the other before jerking back. I decided to keep a safe distance behind them because, while I might have been born at night, it wasn't last night. I drove behind them for a couple of minutes, just waiting for something to go wrong, and sure enough, it did. The car swerved off the road and drove straight through one of those electrical boxes on the side of the road, the big, cabinet-sized ones. Thankfully, it wasn't one of those heavy-duty transformers that could cause a real disaster. There was a loud boom, followed by a small light show those electrical boxes aren't exactly made to be hit by careless drivers. The two occupants of the car popped out as if they'd been ejected by some unseen force. Turns out, they were two teenagers who were too busy flirting and messing around to focus on driving. I couldn't help but start laughing. Who does that at rush hour? I called 911 to report the accident, but I couldn't stop giggling. The two teens were now full-on arguing with each other. The dispatcher on the other end sounded confused as to why I was laughing while reporting a car wreck. I thought about explaining but simply said, "I'm sure the responders will understand. Both occupants seem unharmed, except for their bruised egos." The dispatcher responded with a slow, "Okay." I grabbed an old jacket from my back seat and got out of the car. The teens were still shouting at each other. "I can't believe you crashed my dad's car," yelled the girl. I winced at that. "I told you to stop," the boy yelled back. "Just shut up and give me your jacket," the girl demanded. "No way, it's freezing," the boy snapped back. It was about 60 degrees Fahrenheit, not exactly freezing, but charming, right? I stepped in. "Excuse me, miss," I said. She turned to me with a furious expression and asked, "Yes?" "Here," I said, tossing her the jacket. "I've already called the police. They'll be here soon." Then I walked back to my car, trying not to laugh any harder. By the time I got back to my vehicle, 2 police cruisers had arrived, and 2 officers were surveying the scene. One of them approached the teens while the other came over to me, asking what I was doing. I told the officer that I had everything on my dashcam. He asked to see it, so I pulled up the footage. He watched the erratic driving, the swerving, and the crash, then let out a groan, covering his face with his hand. "Can I get a copy of that?" he asked. By then, a fire truck and an ambulance had shown up, and several curious bystanders had wandered over. I showed the footage to the other officers, a few EMTs, and some firefighters. We all shared some muffled laughter. The bystanders didn't get to see it, though no invitation for them. The officer came back to retrieve the footage on a thumb drive and asked me to delete the clip since both occupants were underage. I complied, deleting the clip and formatting the drive to make sure it was gone. Later, when I finally got to the pizza place, they weren't too happy with me for being so late. They had to remake my pizza, but they did enjoy hearing the story of why their power had flickered about half an hour earlier. And yes, just to assure everyone, the dashcam footage has been completely deleted, and the police are the only ones with a copy. Story 7. I worked in early years for 10 years in a nursery preschool setting. The setting was in the middle of a council estate, and it was not uncommon to be called a rude name by a 2-year-old just setting the scene. But despite that, I loved it. Every lunchtime, there would always be multiple preschoolers upset because they didn't get the yogurt they were all hoping for. The large multi-pack of yogurts had different animals on it, and they all wanted the one with the hippo on a skateboard. Cue disappointed faces when they were handed a boring yogurt instead. To avoid this daily dose of sadness, we decided to turn it into a game. We put all the yogurts in a covered box, and they would reach their hands in for a lucky dip. There was still some disappointment, but the fun of it really changed the lunchtime atmosphere. One day, a little boy tried his luck and asked if he could dip again or if I could swap his yogurt for another. I replied, "Sorry, honey, you get what you're given. That's the rule. Maybe next time." He huffed but accepted it and ate his yogurt. Fast forward to the afternoon play session, and a group of us were hanging out in the home corner. This little boy rarely played there, so I was surprised to see him, but I excitedly welcomed him into the group. He started cooking up a feast of plastic foods and imaginary chicken nuggets. We all sat at the table, happily accepting the glorious dishes. He served us cakes, pizza, pasta. After we'd finished our meal, he walked around with a wooden fruit basket. I looked in and asked for the green apple. He handed me the red one, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, "Sorry, honey, you know the rules. You get what you're given," with a smirk on his face. Oh, goodness, I nearly choked on my imaginary cupcake. Fair play to him. I burst out laughing, and so did he. His mom couldn't stop laughing when I told her the story later.